Hello, welcome to Unspecific History. In this video, I will discuss political history. Are you ready to discover fascinating political history? If yes, then let's get started. Before we get into political history, I want to challenge you with a question. What do you think was the first political event in human history? Was it the formation of the ancient Egyptian kingdom? Was it Alexander the Great's conquest? Was it the construction of the Great Wall of China? Or is it something else? Leave your answer in the comments, and I'll tell you the answer at the end of the video. Don't cheat, okay? Political history is a branch of history that studies the development, interactions, and conflicts between various political groups, countries, and ideologies. Political history is one of the most interesting and important topics to study, because it gives us insight into how societies and governments form, change, and influence each other. However, political history is also a very broad and complex topic, covering various aspects, periods, and regions. Therefore, in this video, I will try to give you an overview of political history, from ancient to modern times, focusing on some of the most influential events and figures. Below we will summarize it as concisely as possible. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support this channel. Ancient times. Political history began when humans began to live in groups and form social organizations. One of the earliest forms of social organization is a tribe, namely a group of people who are related by blood, language, culture, and territory. Tribes were usually led by a chief, who had ultimate authority in managing the tribe's internal and external affairs. Tribes often competed or allied with other tribes for resources, territory, or honor. Examples of famous ancient tribes are the Hebrew tribes, Greek tribes, Roman tribes, Germanic tribes, and Arab tribes. However, tribes were not enough to meet humanity's growing needs and aspirations. Therefore, humans began to create a larger and more complex form of social organization, namely the state. A state is a political entity that has territory, population, government, and sovereignty. Countries usually have more structured and formal political systems, such as monarchy, oligarchy, democracy, or tyranny. Countries also have more advanced political institutions, such as law, bureaucracy, military, and diplomacy. States often interact or conflict with other states to expand influence, power, or wealth. Examples of famous ancient countries are ancient Egypt, Babylonia, Assyria, Persia, Greece, Rome, India, China, and the Maya. One of the most important and influential political events in ancient history was the emergence of civilization. Civilization is a form of social organization that has characteristics such as agriculture, cities, writing, art, religion, and science. Civilization enabled humans to achieve unprecedented levels of progress and culture. Civilization also influences political development, both on a local and global scale. Examples of famous ancient civilizations are the Mesopotamian civilization, the Indus River Valley civilization, ancient Egyptian civilization, ancient Greek civilization, ancient Roman civilization, ancient Indian civilization, ancient Chinese civilization, and Mesoamerican civilization. Middle Ages. The political history of the Middle Ages begins with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century AD, which marked the end of antiquity and the beginning of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages was a historical period that lasted for about 1,000 years, from the 5th century to the 15th century AD. The Middle Ages are often considered the Dark Ages, as they were characterized by decline, chaos, and political instability. However, the Middle Ages was also a golden age because it gave birth to various innovations, explorations, and political transformations. The Middle Ages is divided into 3 parts, namely early, middle, and late. The early Middle Ages was a historical period that lasted from the 5th to the 10th centuries AD. The early Middle Ages were marked by the emergence of barbarian nations. namely ethnic groups originating from northern, eastern and central Europe, who invaded and conquered the territories of the former Roman Empire. These barbarian nations included the Germanic peoples, the Huns, the Slavs, the Vikings and the Magyars. These barbarian nations formed new kingdoms, such as the Frankish kingdom, the Visigoth kingdom, the Ostrogoth kingdom, the Lombard kingdom, and the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. These barbarian peoples also adapted to Roman culture and religion, especially Christianity. One of the most important and influential political events of the early Middle Ages was the coronation of Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD, which marked the founding of the Carolingian Empire, which was the forerunner of modern Europe. The Middle Ages was a historical period that lasted from the 10th century to the 13th century AD. The Middle Ages were marked by the emergence of feudalism, a political and social system based on the relationship between landowners and farmers. Feudalism allowed landlords to have authority and obligations over the land and the people who lived on it, while peasants had to provide services and tribute to the landlords in exchange for protection and certain rights. Feudalism also influenced the structure and function of the church, which was the most powerful and influential political institution in medieval times. The church has spiritual and temporal authority over all of Christian society, and has vast and powerful resources, organization, and doctrine. One of the most important and influential political events in the Middle Ages was the Crusades, namely a series of military expeditions undertaken by European Christians to seize the Holy Land from Muslims, which lasted from the 11th century to the 13th century. The Crusades had a major impact on political, economic, and cultural relations between Europe, Asia, and Africa. The late Middle Ages was a historical period that lasted from the 13th to the 15th centuries AD. The late Middle Ages were marked by the emergence of modern states, namely forms of political organization that had characteristics such as central government, national law, taxation, administration, and armies. These modern states emerged as a result of the process of consolidation and expansion of the power of kings. Kings and nobles who sought to reduce the influence and opposition of feudal lords and the church. These modern states also emerged as a result of processes of societal integration and differentiation, which sought to increase the political awareness and participation of various social groups, such as the middle class, nationalists, and reformists. These modern countries include France, England, Spain, Portugal, Germany, and Italy. One of the most important and influential political events of the late Middle Ages was the Renaissance, an intellectual, artistic, and cultural movement that emerged in Italy in the 14th century AD, marking a revival of interest and appreciation for the classical Greek and Roman heritage. The Renaissance had a profound impact on political, scientific, and humanist developments in Europe and the world. Modern Era. The political history of the modern era begins at the end of the Middle Ages, namely around the 15th century AD, which marked the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern era. The modern era is a historical period extending to the present, characterized by extraordinary progress, change, and political conflict. The modern era is divided into 4 parts, namely early, middle, late, and contemporary. Early modern era is a historical period that lasted from the 15th century to the 18th century AD. The early modern era was marked by the emergence of imperialism, namely political and economic policies aimed at expanding and maintaining a country's power and influence over other countries or regions. Imperialism allowed European countries, especially Spain, Portugal, England, France, and the Netherlands, to explore, conquer, and colonize various regions in Africa, Asia, the Americas, and Oceania. Imperialism also influenced political, trade, and cultural relations between European countries and other countries or regions. One of the most important and influential political events in the early modern era was the Reformation, namely the religious, political, and social movement that emerged in Europe in the 16th century AD, which marked the split of Christianity into 2 main branches, namely Catholicism and Protestantism. The Reformation had a major impact on conflict, tolerance, and political and religious freedom in Europe and the world. Middle Modern Era is a historical period that lasted from the 18th to the 19th century AD. The modern era is marked by the emergence of revolution, namely radical and rapid political, social and economic change, which aims to overthrow or change an existing system or government. Revolutions enable people to demand and fight for their rights, freedoms and welfare, often in conflict with the interests and authority of those in power. Revolutions also influence the development of ideologies, movements and political parties which reflect various views and aspirations of society. Examples of well-known revolutions are the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and the Chinese Revolution. Late modern times is a historical period that lasted from the 20th century to the early 21st century AD. The late modern era is marked by the emergence of globalization, namely the process of political, economic and cultural integration and interdependence between countries or regions in the world. Globalization allows countries or regions to interact and transact more easily, quickly and widely, with the help of technology, communication and transportation. Globalization also influences political challenges, conflicts, and cooperation between countries or regions, which often involve issues such as trade, the environment, human rights, terrorism, and war. Examples of the most important and influential political events in late modern times are World War I, World War II, the Cold War, decolonization, and globalization. Contemporary modern era is a historical period that lasts from the beginning of the 21st century up to the present. The contemporary modern era is marked by the emergence of multilateralism, namely a political approach that involves participation and cooperation from many countries or regions in solving problems or achieving common goals. Multilateralism allows countries or regions to share responsibilities, resources, and information, respecting each other's sovereignty, interests, and diversity. Multilateralism also influences the formation and development of international, regional, or sub-regional organizations which aim to facilitate and regulate political relations between countries or regions. One of the most famous examples of multilateralism is the United Nations UN, which was founded in 1945 as a result of World War II. The UN is an international organization consisting of 193 member states and various specialized bodies, such as the General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, and the International Court of Justice. The UN aims to maintain international peace and security, promote international cooperation, protect human rights, and resolve disputes between countries. However, multilateralism does not always run smoothly and without conflict. Some of the challenges faced by multilateralism include differences in interests, values and views between the countries or regions involved, imbalances in power and influence between large and small countries, the threat of terrorism, war and natural disasters, as well as economic, social and environmental crises that require a fast and effective response. Therefore, multilateralism requires commitment, consensus and compromise from all parties involved, as well as adaptation and innovation to face changes and challenges that continue to emerge. Multilateralism is also not the only form of political relations between countries or regions. There are also other forms, such as bilateralism, namely political relations between two countries or regions. Regionalism, namely political relations between countries or regions that are close together geographically, culturally, or historically. And unilateralism, namely political actions carried out by one country or region without taking into account the opinions or interests of other countries or regions. These forms of political relations can complement, compete with, or conflict with multilateralism, depending on the existing situation and conditions. The contemporary modern era is an era full of dynamics, complexity, and uncertainty. Political relations between countries or regions are one of the important factors that determine the direction and development of history. Multilateralism is a form of political relationship that offers opportunities and challenges for countries or regions that want to work together to create a more peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. As I promised at the beginning of the video, I will answer what was the first political event in human history. There is actually no definite answer to this question. However, there are different opinions about what could be considered the first political event in human history. Here are some examples. Some argue that the first political event was when humans began to form social groups and develop systems of power, authority, and law. This may have happened since the Paleolithic era, when humans lived as hunter-gatherers. There are also those who argue that the first political event was when humans began farming and establishing early civilizations. This may have happened since the Neolithic era, when humans began to settle in certain areas and form larger and more complex communities. Apart from that, there are also those who argue that the first political event was when humans began to create forms of government and countries. This may have happened since the Bronze Age, when humans began to develop new technologies and build kingdoms and large cities. Of course, these opinions are not absolute and can be debated. Political history is the narrative and analysis of events, ideas, movements, organs of government, voters, parties, and political leaders. Political history is interrelated with other fields of historical study, especially diplomatic history, as well as with constitutional history and public history. Political history is also influenced by the context and perspective of the historian who writes it. Therefore, there is no incorrect answer to this question. What exists are various interpretations and views that we can study and compare. If you have other views or answers, please return to the comments column. Don't forget to like plus share. Subscribe to support this channel. Bye and good luck!